She said I was a walking shame, that my existence ruined her life. He looked at me with the same disgust as one would look at a mouse trapped in a trap, in agony, and told me to get lost. It wasn't a scream. It was a cold, calculated order. She kicked me out of her house like someone throwing a broken glass in the trash, without even looking twice at the pieces scattered on the floor. I only took with me my bag, my medicines, an old coat, and a piece of paper that I found on the table, scribbled hastily. I don't know why I took it. All I know is that it was this piece of paper that led me to her hidden diary, and what was written there that destroyed me. It made me wish I had never opened my eyes that day. My name is Teresa. I'm 62 years old. Until 2 weeks ago, I lived at the back of my eldest daughter, Camilla's house. A little bit in the back, poorly ventilated, but silent. I washed my clothes at night to avoid disturbing them. I left early and came back after 8, just to avoid bumping into her or her husband. I never asked for anything, not even when I ran out of money. I took care of my grandchildren when they were little. Then I was left aside, like an old piece of furniture in the living room. When the pullout became a warehouse, they left me there. I accepted, out of fear, out of guilt, for love I don't even know anymore. People on the street thought I was a devoted grandmother who lived with her daughter for company. At the market, they said I seemed very calm, and I was. Stillness is what remains after many years of running away, hiding, omitting. But inside, I was on alert, because the past, no matter how much we push it under the carpet, one day comes back, and he comes back thirsty. Camilla was always cold to me since I was a teenager, but this time it was different. That expulsion had a taste of revenge, as if she had been waiting for this moment for years. When she screamed that I was the reason for all her trauma, that my presence was toxic, and that I was a cancer in her life, there was no longer anger, there was contempt, and contempt hurts more than anger. That morning, I slept on the bench at the bus station with my head against the cold wall, trying to remember where everything started to go wrong. But memory doesn't work in a straight line. It comes in flashes, like stabbings. I saw the image of Camilla at 7 years old, lying with me on a rented bed, holding my hand. And then I saw her face now, calling me trash, trash. I, who sold my own blood to buy the antibiotics that saved her life once. But nobody knows these things, and even those who know pretend it doesn't matter. On the 3rd day, I went back to the house to get my documents. I took advantage of everyone being out. The key still worked. I went in, took my medicine box, my expired identity card, and went to Camilla's bedroom closet. I don't know what took me there. Perhaps a last impulse from a wounded mother. Maybe an instinct. Or maybe destiny really has its ways of pushing us where we don't want to go. It was at the bottom of a drawer locked with tape that I found an old notebook with a black cover. Therapeutic reports, the label said. But it was more than that. It was her diary. Each page is a dagger. There were reports of therapy sessions, yes, but also confessions. Confessions so poisonous, so repulsive, so filled with hate that I had to sit on the floor to continue reading. She said she lied to her husband about my story, who told him that I was arrested for theft, that I got involved with criminals, that I used dirty money to pay for her school. She said she had been disgusted with me since she was a teenager, that she dreamed of seeing me far away. It told intimate details about my life that she could only know if she was spying on me. He talked about my medicines, my nightmares, the times he heard me crying at night, and instead of compassion, he felt pleasure in knowing that I was suffering. But what really destroyed me were the parts where she confessed things I never imagined. She talked about how she manipulated her husband, how she made one of her brothers fight with me just to isolate me, how she used her children as an emotional shield, and worse, she said that one of the worst nights of her life was when she had to lie to protect me from an old acquaintance of mine, a name I hadn't heard in over 30 years, a name that, when I read it there, made my stomach turn, and my entire past rush through my eyes. She knew who I was, and he knew who that man was, and yet he left me living there, unarmed, vulnerable, close to his grandchildren, as if I was waiting for the day when the past finally came to charge me. And when that happened, she wanted to be out of it, clean, unattainable, perfect in the eyes of others. But the past has come, and now he didn't knock on the door. He came in, with everything. If you are watching this story so far, I ask you to like this video, subscribe to the Emosound Age channel, and activate the bell, because here we show that it is never too late to face your own ghosts and regain your dignity, and share with someone who has been called shameful but chose to stand tall. In the next chapters, you will understand who that man Camilla mentioned in the diary was. You'll know what I had to do to save my children and why I could never look in the mirror again without feeling scared. It's not over, it's just beginning. I always thought I had buried it all, that if I stayed silent long enough, if I did everything right for years and years, the past would erase itself. But the truth is that he never left me. He lived in every expression line on my face, in every hidden scar, in the silence in my eyes when someone asked where I came from. And now, with that diary in my hands, it was as if everything had been excavated again, with force, without anesthesia. My past had returned, and to understand why my daughter hates me so much, why she kicked me out like a dirty animal, you have to go back well before Camilla was born. I was born in 1963, in a tiny village between hills and mud, without electricity, without school, without anything. My parents died young, in their early 30s, victims of an explosion in a clandestine shed where they produced fuel alcohol. I was 8 years old. They sent me to a nun's orphanage where there was little food, and fear was daily. We slept in cold rooms with thin mattresses and glassless windows. At night, we heard the screams of the younger girls who returned from night visits with businessmen and politicians that no one dared to name. I learned from an early age that the world has no space for fragile girls. Either you harden or you disappear. When I was 15, I ran away. I ended up at the bus station in a medium-sized city, without documents, without a name, with a holy blanket and a broken tooth. I worked cleaning bathrooms in a bar, then as a waitress. And one day I met a man who seemed kind. He said I was beautiful, that I deserved more. He gave me hot food, a pair of shoes, and then took me to live with him. At 17, I was already part of a network transporting illegal packages between states. I never touched a gun, but I carried envelopes that I couldn't open. He said it was just light stuff, but I knew what it was, and I accepted, because he gave me shelter, because I got pregnant, because I wanted to get off the street. Camilla was born in a clandestine clinic. No registration, no crib, no father present. When I looked at her for the first time, I decided I would do anything for that child to have a life that I didn't have. And that's exactly what I did, anything. At 23, I already had 2 children and a huge debt to a man who claimed to be my protector. They forced me to deliver an international package. They promised to pay me $5,000, money I had never seen in my life. I accepted, hid the packages inside my baby's diapers, and pretended to be a tourist at an airport. I was stopped, questioned, but they let me pass. I arrived home with my soul in pieces, shaking. I bought food, clothes, and paid 3 months of rent in advance. The following month, he disappeared with everything. I never saw that man again, but he left a distrust in me that never went away. After that, I started cleaning for a living. She used different names, false documents, and told her neighbors that she was a private nurse. I worked in hospitals, in homes for the elderly. I learned how to give injections and measure blood pressure. I never touched anything illegal again, but the fear was already part of me. Fear of being discovered, fear of losing my children, fear of being arrested, and them ending up in the same kind of place where I grew up. Camilla grew up suspicious. She was always smarter than her brothers. When he was 7 years old, he asked why I always moved house. At 10, she asked why no one knew her father's real surname. And at 13, she saw me crying, hiding with a letter in my hand. A letter that said that a former work partner had been arrested and that they were mentioning my name in the investigation, that if I didn't cooperate, they could frame me. It was at that time that I sold what little I had and fled with the 3 of them to a seaside town. I changed the children's names, invented a new story. I went on to say that I was a sailor's widow, but Camilla didn't buy it. She had a good memory. She remembered the voices, the fights, the envelopes, the nights without light because we were hiding. And even without knowing everything, she put the pieces together, and it fueled hatred. Over time, the other 2 went on with their lives. One became a driver, the other went to work. Camilla stayed. He got married, had children, built a house. She asked me to live at the bottom of the land when her husband became unemployed and I offered to help. She accepted, but never forgave me. Even without saying a word, she never forgot it. And now I understand. Because reading that diary, It was clear that she had been carrying hurt since she was a child. Magician, the ones that maybe weren't even my fault, but that fell upon me like an inevitable punishment. She said I was cold, absent, that I was never a real mother, that I was always looking over my shoulder like I was running away from something. And it was true. I ran away. Not just from the police or criminals. I ran away from the mirror. Running away was my way of loving. I protected my children by warding off all dangers, including myself, but it left scars in them and in me. There was one time in 1998 that I needed to deliver a suitcase to a woman who lived in another state. They paid me 1,200 Rs. With that money, I bought Camilla's school books, paid for her brother's doctor's appointment, who had asthma, and even managed to buy her graduation dress. She cried when she received the gift. He hugged me. But today, reading those pages, I see that she thought that money was dirty, that the dress was stained with blood, even if symbolic. And maybe he was. I tried. I swear by everything that is holy. I tried to get out of that life. I tried to be a good mother, good woman, good person. But no one teaches you how to start over when the world only taught you how to survive. And for me, surviving meant sacrificing everything that was light, beautiful, innocent. And my children paid the price. If you've been following this story so far, comment on what was the greatest sacrifice someone in your family has ever made for love, or that you had to do it yourself. You don't need to give details, just write. Because sometimes, just seeing that other people also made mistakes trying to get it right makes us breathe easier. Like this video, subscribe to the Emotion of Age channel and activate the bell. In the next chapters, you will see what happened when my name was circulated again in a police investigation, and how it shook everything that was left of my life into silence. Follow with me. It's not over yet. What I didn't know that day I read Camilla's diary was that the worst was yet to come. Those words written by her, full of venom and hurt, had already been transformed into actions, in phone calls, in complaints, and now, alone, expelled from home, with the past streaming through my eyes and fear gnawing at my soul, I found myself surrounded. There was no longer any place to run. What I had feared for 40 years was coming back, and it was coming in a hurry. 2 days after leaving my daughter's house, I received a visit from a man in a suit. He didn't wear a badge, but his manner was that of someone who knew behind the scenes. I knew where to step, how to look. He met me at the guest house where I was staying. He said he was not a police officer, but represented an office that investigated people linked to an old interstate trafficking case. When I heard the name of the operation, my legs felt weak. It was the same name as the investigation that I thought had already been archived. But now, 25 years later, someone was reopening it, and reopening with force. The man did not threaten directly, but made it clear that my name appeared on old documents, that there were new allegations, new testimonies, that if I collaborated, I could avoid bigger problems. I said I didn't know anything, who had already left this life behind, that she was old, sick, with nothing. He looked at me with pity. Pity is worse than anger. Anger is still human. Pity dehumanizes. That night, I tried to call my youngest son. He answered, but he was dry. He said he heard what happened, that Camilla had filed a police report for emotional threat, that the neighbors were talking about, that our family name had returned to being whispered in the neighborhood corridors like in the old days. I asked for help. I asked to stay at his house for a few days. He hesitated. He said he needed to talk to his wife. Then he sent a message saying it would be better not to. That broke me. I started living in hiding, a day in each corner. I avoided busy places. I didn't answer unknown numbers. But the past is never tiring. He found me again, in line at the pharmacy, through a woman I hadn't seen in decades. Her name was Ruth. We worked together when I made deliveries. She recognized me, approached me, and, with a joyless smile, said that they were asking about me, that they had searched Camilla's name, that they had tracked their children's CPF numbers, that the people in the man in the suit's office were calling old contacts, that a dossier was being assembled. I started to break out in a cold sweat. Ruth handed me a folded piece of paper with a number on it. He said that if I wanted to survive, I would need protection. Protection is a word that can mean many things. In that context, it meant silence, commitment, submission, but I could no longer accept living on my knees. Days later, I was called to testify. An officer handed me the summons at the door of a hostel. When I saw the paper, I felt dizzy. The name of the operation was there, in large letters. The hearing would be in 2 weeks. The promo Aurea wanted to understand my involvement with 2 figures who were being tried today for money laundering and criminal association. One of them was the man who recruited me at 17. The other, the partner who disappeared with my money and my dignity when I needed it most. I started collecting documents, old receipts, old letters, records of medical appointments under false names. I went to an old friend, Lourdes, who worked as a secretary in a notary's office. I asked for help. She gave me advice, but she also judged me with her eyes. He said that if I were exposed, my grandchildren would suffer, that maybe it would be better to disappear, go to another state. I thought about it, but inside me, something started to change. A nuisance, a contained anger, a desire not to disappear anymore. The situation with Camilla also worsened. She started posting insults on social media. She said she had cut a toxic bond from her life, that the truth always comes, that blood is not synonymous with love, and people commented. Some knew our history, others invented it, and I was there, unable to defend myself, watching my life turn into public ruin. One night, I went to her house. I stood on the other side of the street, watching. The kitchen light was on. I heard laughter. I saw my grandson running down the hall. My heart sank. It was for them that I had done everything. It was for them that I had sacrificed my soul. And now, they didn't even know who I was. Or worse, they thought they knew. The following day, an audio began circulating in neighborhood WhatsApp groups. It was my voice, an excerpt from a conversation with Camilla, distorted, edited, out of context. It felt like I was threatening her. In the audio, my voice said that she would pay dearly for kicking me out. But that was a setup, a lie, and yet it spread. In less than 24 hours, I became the monster, the spiteful old woman, the ex-criminal who wanted revenge. I started receiving anonymous messages, some supportive, most of them hate. People who said that a mother who did what I did deserves to rot, that justice should bury me alive, that I was the shame of the neighborhood. I cringed. I cried myself to sleep. I woke up with a swollen face, not having the courage to go out. But at that rock bottom, a whisper was born, weak but stubborn. What if, for once, I didn't run away? What if, for the first time, I faced everything? If you are listening to this story and have already experienced the feeling of being condemned without trial, of being erased from the life of someone you created with blood and sacrifice, comment with one word: silence. Because silence can protect, but it can also kill from within. Like this video, subscribe to the Emotion of Age channel and activate the bell. The story has not yet come to an end. It's just gaining momentum. In the next chapter, you will see the moment I broke down, when I realized that if I didn't speak up now, no one would ever hear my truth again. Follow me. It will hurt, but it will free you. It was on a gray morning, one of those mornings where the air seems heavier, that the last line of my resistance gave way. I was already exhausted, sleeping poorly, with eyes always red from crying in secret, eating little, walking through the city like a shadow. Every corner seemed to carry a whisper against me. Each face looked at me with judgment. Even those who didn't know the story seemed to know. It was as if shame had stuck to my skin, my smell, my slow pace. But it was that day, in that cold waiting room, in front of the social worker who read my data like someone looking at a lifeless document, that I realized that there was no longer any way to pretend that this was just a passing nightmare. He looked at me with some discomfort, then lowered his voice and asked, trying to sound gentle, if I was aware that my daughter had requested a protective order. I didn't understand at first. Then he repeated it, more dryly. Camilla had asked me to stay away from her and her children. The same daughter I carried alone on an interstate bus when she was just 5 days old. The same one I breastfed until almost 2 years old, because I didn't have money for milk. That girl I saved more than once, hiding her in the back of a closet when the house was invaded by armed collectors. Now she wanted me away, legally, as if I were a danger, a risk. I left there staggering. I sat on a park bench. I saw mothers with their little children playing. A boy of about 6 ran up to me and smiled. I smiled back, but inside, I broke down. That same afternoon, I received a call that made what little was left of my world fall apart. He was the public attorney assigned to my case. I said that, after analyzing the documents received and my daughter's statements, there was a real possibility that I would be indicted for historical negligence and association with a criminal group. I said that was crazy, that I wasn't part of no group for decades, that I lived by cleaning and doing odd jobs, that there was nothing left. He replied coldly, that justice does not have selective memory, that facts are facts. That same night, I went to look for Lourdes, the friend who worked at the registry office. I wanted to see if she could get any copies of documents that would prove that I never received money directly from the group being investigated. She received me strangely. He avoided my gaze. I was nervous. It was then that I realized she had handed over my details, probably in exchange for some protection, or money, or pressure. I didn't need to ask. Her silence said it all. I felt like I had been stabbed in the back, in the eye. Following days, everything got worse. A report began to circulate on local networks. A small but sensationalist channel made a video with the title, "Grandmother Involved in a Criminal Faction is Denounced by Her Own Daughter." They used old photos of me, images of the front of Camilla's house, and even excerpts from the distorted audio. The video had thousands of views. I started to walk around covered, avoiding being recognized. One day, a woman pushed me on the bus. He said he didn't want to sit near a criminal. A teenager spat on the ground in front of me. Someone spray-painted the word trash on the wall of the hostel where I slept. I was on edge, but there was still one more wound left. I received a voicemail from my oldest grandson. He is 12 years old. His voice was different, as if he was holding back crying. He said his mother told him I was a criminal, that I could hurt people, that he didn't want to see me anymore, that he was scared of me. I couldn't respond. I just stood there with the cell phone shaking in my hands, listening to that voice that used to affectionately call me grandma, now treating me like a monster. It was that night, inside a public bathroom, lying on the cold floor, with my face pressed against the ceramic, that I broke. My entire body hurt. My soul was in pieces. There was no one else by my side. No children, no friends, no memory that could save me. And then I said out loud, with all the strength I had left, "It's over. I'm not going to swallow this in silence anymore. I'm not a saint. I made mistakes, lots of them, but I also struggled. I loved it too. I also bled trying to do right with the little I had. And now, if I have to fall, let it be on my feet." The next morning, I reached out to a local journalist, a young guy with an independent blog. I told part of my story. I handed over copies of Camilla's diary. I showed documents, photos, letters. I asked him to listen to me before judging me, and he listened. He looked me in the eyes and said something I will never forget. He said truth has no appearance, and sometimes justice begins with the courage to tell the side that no one wants to hear. I knew that would be the point of no return, that by exposing my daughter, I would create an even greater abyss. But I could no longer be the only one to bleed in silence. Camilla needed to face what she did, not just me, but herself. In trying to destroy me, she also revealed her own poison. And now, I had something in my hands that could change everything. If you have ever felt alone, if you have ever been betrayed by someone you created, fed, protected, comment with the word break. Because sometimes, breaking is the beginning of rebuilding. Like this video, subscribe to the Emotion of Age channel and activate the bell. In the next chapter, you will see how a simple recording, forgotten inside an old cell phone, brought to light truths that no one expected, and how the truth, even late, still has the power to liberate. Come with me, there's still more. When I left the editorial office of that independent blog, with my face still damp from the tears I tried to hide during the interview, I felt that something had changed inside me. For the first time in a long time, I had spoken, not just told, spoken with truth, with pain, with memory. The journalist, the young man with calm speech and attentive eyes, listened to me without interrupting, recorded everything. I asked him to publish when he thought it was safe. I no longer cared about the consequences. I just wanted my voice to be in the world too, because until that moment, we only heard Camilla's version, the neighbor's version, the whispers that invent monsters. That same week, I returned to the guest house where I was staying and decided to open the wooden box where I kept everything that was left of my story. Inside, there was an audio tape, one of those old ones, which I thought was damaged. It was from one of the few recorders I used when I tried to leave a message for my middle son years ago before fleeing an ambush. The recorder itself no longer worked, but the tape was there. I picked up my cell phone and looked for a cheap scanning service. I gave the tape to a guy who promised to get back to me in 2 days. Meanwhile, the blog video has been published. There were no sensational cuts, no dramatic soundtrack. It was raw. It was me, my words, my eyes, my story. The video spread slowly but surely. In the comments, people said they felt my pain, that they didn't know everything, that Camilla's narrative now seemed incomplete. One woman wrote that she was also wrongly accused by her daughter. A man said he remembered me from an old neighborhood and that I had always been a hard worker. I read every comment with burning eyes. It wasn't redemption, but it was a sign that maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. 2 days later, I received the message from the guy on the tape. He said he managed to extract the audio. When I heard it, my hands started to shake. It was a recording of a conversation between me and Camilla's father, made without him knowing, while I was trying to convince him to leave the city and leave the girl alone. He threatened to expose my deliveries. He said he had documents, contacts, and there, in that audio, he confessed details of how he manipulated police officers, how he used children to extort women like me. It was proof that no one had ever achieved. His voice, clean, clear, revealing. Crimes that he always hid behind his suit and easy smile. That was more than a relief. It was a key, a piece of the puzzle that could change everything. I took the audio to a lawyer recommended by the journalist himself, a silent gentleman with a hard look. He listened until the end, then slowly took off his glasses and said that it was explosive, that with this proof, I could not only defend myself, but perhaps help bring down a long-standing network of corruption and abuse. I was silent for a few seconds. I felt the weight of the past on my back, but then I looked up and responded, "I'm ready. You can use it." While the lawyer was preparing the petition to attach the audio to my case, the journalist published a second part of the article, this time with excerpts from the recording. The impact was immediate. Camilla's father's name began to circulate on the networks. People who lived with him began to comment and remember strange behaviors. A former co-worker spoke out, saying he always suspected. Another woman from the countryside claimed to have been his victim in the 90s. The silence of decades began to crack. Camilla, on the other hand, reacted as I expected. She went live, crying, saying that everything was an invention, that I was lying, that I wanted to destroy her life. But her tears were no longer convincing in the same way, because now there were documents, dates, voices, and there was also a difference. Now, I was no longer silent. I received messages of support from people I didn't even know, but I also received a letter from my youngest granddaughter, written with a blue pen on lined paper. She said she didn't understand everything, but that she loved me, that she remembered when I combed her hair, when I told her bedtime stories, that he wanted to see me. That letter was worth more than any acquittal, because it gave me something I thought I had lost forever: hope. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. Meanwhile, the prosecution agreed to include the audio as evidence. What's more, they began to investigate other people mentioned in the recording, names that had been untouched for decades, powerful men, men who thought they were invisible. But now, by my voice, they were being dragged into the light. The day before the hearing, I was called to a meeting with the lawyer, the prosecutor, and a social worker. I was offered a deal. If I cooperated with all the information I had, if I handed over everything I remembered, they would file the request for a protective order and suspend the proceedings against me. It wouldn't be total absolution, but it would be justice, real justice, not the one sold or distorted, but one that recognizes the weight of those who made mistakes trying to survive. I accepted, without asking for anything in return. I just asked for my name to be removed from the list of suspects, and that, if possible, it would be recognized that my daughter omitted serious information in her statement, not for revenge, but for real. If you are listening to this story and believe that there is still room for the truth, even when it arrives late, comment with the word proof, because sometimes a single test changes an entire life. Like this video, subscribe to the Emotion of Age channel and activate the bell. In the next chapter, you will follow the final confrontation with me, the audience, the moment when I sat in front of everyone who wanted to silence me, and finally, I said everything. Until the end. Stay with me. Not long to go. But it is now that everything is defined. The forum building seemed bigger that day, not because it was different, but because I was small. When we carry guilt for years, it shrinks our body, our posture, our voice. I climbed the steps in silence, dressed in simple, clean clothes, the same ones I wore to job interviews. The lawyer was waiting for me at the door. He didn't say anything, just nodded. He knew it was the day, the moment, and that I would finally leave the weight of silence on the table, in front of everyone who judged me, without listening to me. The room was cold. The white lights from the ceiling seemed to want to reveal every flaw of mine, every mark on my face, every scar hidden in time. There were journalists. There were prosecutors. There was Camilla's defender, sitting with a red briefcase, her eyes sharp as razors. There was my daughter. Yes, she was there, sitting on the other side of the room, surrounded by 2 lawyers, her face still, the same face I kissed so many times while she slept, afraid the world would take her away from me. But now, she was the one who wanted to erase me. The judge, a woman with a firm voice and restrained gestures, opened the session punctually. He said that this was not a criminal trial, but a hearing to analyze documents and testimonies relating to the reopening of an old investigation. He said there would be no conviction at that time, but rather the beginning of an investigation process. I listened to everything carefully. Then they called me. I walked to the center of the room like someone crossing a minefield. I sat down, adjusted my skirt over my knees, and took a deep breath. The prosecutor started with cold questions. My name, age, profession, previous addresses. I confirmed everything calmly. Then the painful questions began. If I was aware of the acts committed by Camilla's father, if I knew his name appeared in previous investigations, if I was aware of the risk I posed to my daughter by living with that man. I breathed once more. Then I spoke. I told him about the orphanage. I told about the first man who promised me safety and only scared me. I talked about nights sleeping on the floor with Camilla on my lap in houses that weren't ours. I told you about the wrong choices, but also the ones I couldn't avoid. I talked about deliveries, yes, but I also talked about the doctor's appointments, the school uniforms bought with the little I had left, the days when I ate plain rice so she would have a colorful dish. The prosecutor tried to interrupt, but the judge asked me to continue, and so I handed over what I had, the recording, the letter from the ex-partner, dated 2001, where he admitted that he used me as bait for larger transactions. The receipts, the names, the dates. I gave everything away, my entire past on that table. Naked, no makeup, no excuses. Camilla reacted. He shook his head, muttered things to the lawyer. When it was her turn to speak, she cried. He said he suffered. That was an unstable childhood, that I was never emotionally present, that I hid things from her. All true. But then she said I was dangerous. That could have killed. That I was capable of anything for money. That's when the judge interrupted her. He asked about the diary, about the passages in which she admits to having lied to her husband, about the audios where she suggests that she exposed me through an emotional strategy. Camilla stuttered. He tried to change the subject, but the mask had begun to crack. One of the most difficult moments was when the judge read an excerpt from the diary in which Camilla describes how powerful she felt by making me feel unwanted. The room fell silent. Not even the keys on the registry office computer were moving. And then came the question, the most important of all. The judge looked me in the eye and asked what I wanted from that hearing, justice or revenge. I responded without hesitation, I don't want revenge. I've lived longer than I should carrying anger. I want justice. I want my daughter to recognize that I am not the monster she invented. I want my grandchildren to know that I made mistakes trying to get it right. I want this city to stop spitting me out like I'm walking trash. And I want, above all, that a woman like me never again needs to be crushed in silence to maintain the appearance of a destroyed family. After that, everything changed. The prosecutor requested the suspension of the protective measure. The old investigation was officially reopened, but this time with other figures at the center of the investigation, names that until then were protected by silence and power. Camilla's father became wanted. The media began to change their tune. It was no longer the story of the criminal grandmother. Now it was the story of the woman who survived abandonment, exploitation, silence, and who decided to speak out. At the end of the hearing, when I left the room, some journalists approached. One of them asked if I regretted everything. I stopped, looked at him tiredly and courageously. I regret accepting crumbs as love. I regret letting my daughter grow up believing that dignity was silence. But I don't regret speaking out today, because today, for the first time, my story was my own. If you believe that every woman has the right to be heard, even when the whole world tries to keep quiet, comment with the word truth, because truth is not luxury, it's necessity. Like this video, subscribe to the Emotion of Age channel and activate the bell. In the next chapter title, you will see what happened next. The after that, no one counts. What it's like to rebuild your life at the age of 62, with your name cleared, but your heart still in pieces. Stay with me. It is in the new beginning that dignity flourishes. 6 months have passed since the hearing. The world didn't change suddenly, like in the movies. Time has not brought miracles, but it brought silence. A silence different from the one that suffocated me before. A silence that was now mine. For the first time in decades, I no longer needed to hide. I no longer had lies to support, nor fears leaning against the walls of my room. I still woke up in the middle of the night, sometimes with my heart racing, thinking someone was at the door, but it was just the wind. And the wind, yes, now it was just wind. Today I live in a quiet village, about 2 hours from the city where everything happened. The house is small, with 2 rooms, light walls, and a simple backyard, with pots of basil and rosemary. I like the smell of living things. I work at a community center, helping older women who, like me, have gone through things no one wants to hear about. They taught us to be silent, and now together, we are learning to count. I receive a modest but honest salary. I teach sewing workshops, sometimes cooking. I also take care of the welcome coffee at meetings. They are ladies of all ages, from all backgrounds. Each one carries a wounded name and a swallowed history. When people ask me what I did before, I say I survived. And they understand, because all of us, in one way or another, were trained for this. Survive in silence. Now, we are trying to live, and that takes courage. My documents are regularized. My name no longer appears in any inquiries. The prosecutor's office formally dropped all suspicions, recognizing my collaboration. I didn't win medals or headlines, but I gained something more valuable, the right to exist without pretending. And that, for those who lived half a century in hiding, is freedom. Camilla? She cut off all contact. He moved house, changed his children's school, blocked all communication channels. At first, it devastated me, but then I understood. Sometimes, distancing is the only way to avoid repeating the cycle. I stopped trying to recapture what perhaps never existed in the way I imagined. Today, I wish her to find peace. May she understand one day that the pain she carries is not just mine, that she was also a victim, and that's why she doesn't need to become an executioner. But not everything was lost. My youngest granddaughter, the one who wrote me the letter with a blue pen, visits me once a month. She comes with her backpack on her back, her hair tied up, and her eyes shining with questions. He asks what my childhood was like, what it was like to run away, how I managed to continue. I tell you what I can. What can she hear? And the rest, I turn into stories. She loves stories. She says she wants to be a writer, and perhaps, unintentionally, she already is. Because every time she listens to me, she writes a little of me inside her. On our last date, she gave me a notebook, hardcover, blank pages. He asked me to write down everything I remember. I said I wanted to keep my truth, even if the world tried to erase it. I cried when I read the dedication. For my grandmother, who wasn't perfect but was brave. This notebook became my new diary, not to hide, but to let go, to register, so that one day, someone will read it and know that women like me existed, and they survived. The newspaper that published my story is still active. The journalist became a friend. Sometimes he visits me for coffee. He says my case made other women appear, that more than 30 complaints emerged after publication, some against the same names from my past, others against new names, but with old practices. This gives me strength, knowing that, even in silence, even at the end of the road, my voice still resonated with someone. As for the other children, one remains distant. The other wrote to me on my birthday. It was a short message, but respectful. He said he understood better now, that you needed distance to see, and I accepted. I didn't demand affection. I only responded with gratitude, because sometimes a reconnection gap is already a bridge. My health is good. I take my medication. I go for walks. I sleep better. I started embroidering again. Small orders, dish towels, cushions. Working with my hands calms me down. It reminds me that I am still capable of creating beauty, even after so much chaos. The neighbors here treat me naturally. Some know my story, others just intuit, but no one judges me out loud. And that, after all, is enough. I don't want admiration. I just want peace. And I'm learning that peace is not the absence of pain. It's acceptance. It's being able to look back without hating yourself. The other day I sat in the backyard and watched the sky. I saw the same shades of blue that I saw as a child at the top of the hill, first of all, and I realized that the sky never leaves me, no, not even God. But sometimes we think He is silent, when in fact it is just our fault that makes too much noise. If you've made it this far, if you followed my story from the beginning, I beg you, leave a comment with the word dignity, because it was her that I fought for, not for easy forgiveness, not for applause, but for dignity. Because it's never too late to face the past, undo the lies, and start over. It is never too late to reclaim your name, voice, and right to truly exist. Like this video, subscribe to the Emotion of Age channel and activate the bell. Share with someone who needs to remember that starting over has no age, that the truth may hurt, but it sets you free. That dignity is worth more than any appearance. Thank you for listening to me. May your story, like mine, find space to flourish. Even after everything, the box where I kept everything stayed with me. Even after moving cities, even after getting back on my feet. It's small, made of dark wood, with an old lock. Inside it, nothing of value to others, but all for me. There are the papers that tell my truth, the names that haunted me, the dates that changed my story, and among them, the object that was perhaps the most painful, and at the same time, the most revealing. Camilla's diary. I reread that notebook less often now. He no longer tried to torture me, but every now and then I opened up, not to suffer, but to understand. Some words that tore me apart at the beginning today sounded like the scream of an injured girl. She wrote those pages like someone pouring poison, but today I know that much of that poison was reflex, a reflection of what she heard, what she experienced, what I didn't know how to protect. I was wrong, yes, but she was also struck by the darkness that surrounded us, and maybe that's why I wrote everything with so much anger. It was the only way to not fall apart inside. The diary stayed with me. The court never asked for it as direct evidence. The emotional content was dense, but legally it was fragile. Still, it helped the journalist put together part of the timeline, and more than that, it helped me understand my daughter. As time went by, I stopped reading as a wounded mother. I started reading it as a woman who has also screamed inside. In addition to the diary, there is a piece of paper with the drawing my grandson made when he was little. A drawing in which I appeared with a blue cape holding a huge heart. He wrote, "Grandma, courage." At the time, I thought it was cute. Today, that is a symbol. The child he was saw in me what I didn't see in myself. And when, years later, he repeated his mother's words, saying he was afraid of me, I almost destroyed that drawing, but I couldn't. Because that was real, more real than the fear planted later. And when he wrote to me, apologizing, saying he was confused, that he was too young to understand what he heard at home, I cried with the paper in my hands, because love can remain silent, but it does not disappear. Another object that never left the box was the small chain with a silver cross. It was my mother's, the only thing they gave me at the orphanage when she died. A simple chain with no material value, but it was the only concrete memory I had of her. For, say, years, I used it hidden, as a protection. On the worst nights, when I slept on the street or in shacks, I clutched the cross between my fingers. It was as if she were there, not to judge me, but to remind me that someone loved me once, even if for a short time. These objects remind me of who I was, who I am, and who I don't want to be anymore. At the community center where I work, I use these stories in the form of metaphors. I do not expose names or details, but I talk about overcoming, starting over, truths that hurt. The women listen to me with teary eyes. Some call me mother, others sister, but everyone, at some point, sees themselves in me. and I see myself in them. The woman who had to sell her stove to pay for her son's treatment. The one who was kicked out of the house by a daughter after years of being the foundation of the family. The one who hid a letter for 20 years out of fear of what was written. One of these women, called Estella, gave me a gift. It was a small stone, hand-painted with the word "New Beginning." She said that everyone needs a symbolic object that represents the turning point in their own history. I kept this stone in the same box, along with the diary, the drawing, and the cross. Because starting over for me was it. Don't forget what happened, but carry everything with less weight. I still receive messages, people who saw the videos, who read the article, who were moved by my story. Some call me a warrior, others for inspiration. I appreciate it, but I always say that I'm nothing like that. I just survived, and when the pain gave me a chance, I chose to speak. Just that, but I know that for a lot of people that's all. The other day, I was called for an interview on a local radio station. I talked about aging with dignity, only about being a woman in a world that silences us. I spoke about wounded motherhood, about how loving is not synonymous with erasing yourself. When I left the radio, a lady hugged me on the sidewalk. She said she heard me and felt less alone. It was at that moment that I understood. My most valuable object was not in the box. It was in me, my voice. I kept it for too long. And now, I won't let anyone bury her anymore. If you've come this far, if you've listened to each chapter of this story, leave your comment with the word "fresh start," because that's what this journey represents. A possible fresh start. No makeup, no soap opera ending, but with truth. Like this video, subscribe to the Emotion of Age channel, and activate the bell. Share with someone who needs to remember that the objects that save us don't always shine. Sometimes they are just pages written in anger, children's drawings or stones with simple words. But it's these little things that ultimately sustain our strength. Thank you for walking with me this far. The story may have ended, but the courage continues, in me, and if you want, on you too. Waking up every day, knowing that you are alive by insistence and not by luck, changes the way you see everything around you. Even the sky looks different. People talk about overcoming as if it were a straight line, as if it was enough to decide to be happy and everything would fall into place. But it's not like that. The truth is that starting over requires sacrifices that no one sees. And I needed to do more than one, even after everything came to light, because it's not enough to tell the truth once. You have to sustain it day after day, even when it bleeds. The first big sacrifice I needed to make after the hearing was giving up on reconciliation with Camilla. For weeks, I carried the secret hope that after everything, she would look for me. Maybe he would send me a letter, a message, anything. But time passed, and her silence became harsher than any hateful word. And then I understood. She didn't want to forgive me. She wanted me to stop existing in her world. That tore me apart. But accepting was the first step to breathing without guilt. I could have insisted. I could have gone back. I could have used the love of my grandchildren as a bridge. But this would come at a cost. And the cost would be my dignity. Because love that is begged is already rotten. And I promised myself that I would never again accept crumbs in anyone's name, not even my own. That was a sacrifice, an invisible cut that bleeds silently. Another sacrifice was abandoning the plan to write a book with my story. The journalist who helped me suggested it. He said it had content, that it could become something important. I started writing myself, but I soon realized that it threw me back into a cycle of exposure. Every sentence I put on paper reopened a wound. I dreamed of the past. I woke up with chest pains. What was supposed to be liberation began to become prison. So I stopped. I kept the texts, thanked them for their support, and said no. Because writing to heal is one thing, writing to relive is another. And I no longer wanted to live, trapped in my own pain. The third resignation was the name change. My lawyer said I could adopt a new surname, disappear from the systems, start over somewhere else with another identity. It was legally possible, but I refused. Because my name carries everything I was, everything I faced, everything I survived. Changing my name would be like tearing up all the letters in my story. And no matter how heavy they are mine. I don't want to erase who I was. I just want to remain at peace with who I have become. And perhaps the hardest sacrifice of all was relearning how to look in the mirror. For many years, I only saw guilt, dirt, shame. My eyes ran away from the reflection. I put on makeup not to beautify myself, but to hide the pain. Until, one day, a woman at the community center told me that she admired my eyes. He said they had strength. I didn't know what to answer. I had never heard that. That night, I took off my makeup and looked at myself for a few minutes. It was me. There, tired, scarred, but whole. It was like meeting someone I had lost a long time ago. These sacrifices did not appear in the newspapers. They were not commented on in the videos, but they were the ones who supported my fresh start. Because there is no rebirth without loss, and loss is not always bad. Sometimes losing is also gaining breathing space. At community center meetings, we started doing a circle called The Things I Left Behind. Each woman writes on a piece of paper what she had to give up to survive. Some wrote people, others, cities, clothes, names, beliefs. I wrote expectations, because they were the ones who hurt me the most. The expectation of being forgiven, to be understood, to be loved the way I thought I deserved. Letting go of these ideas freed me. And even with all these statements, I achieved concrete things. I receive help from the government for having collaborated with the justice system. It's not much, but it gives me autonomy. I opened a small community sewing workshop. I have taught more than 20 women how to repair clothes, hem them, create cushions. One of them even got a job in a store after learning from me. This fills me with pride, because now I don't just survive, I help others to live. It's not all perfect. I still get dirty looks when I return to the old city. I still hear people saying that the courts were kind to me, but these voices no longer enter my skin, because I learned that the judgment of others only has strength when it finds cracks within us, and I spent too much time filling holes with shame. Now I use real cement, made of courage, humility, and well-chosen silence. If you've come this far, if you've followed this entire story, comment with the word courage, because she was the one who brought me here. Courage to resign, to accept, to start over. Like this video, subscribe to the Emotion of Age channel and activate the bell. Share with someone who needs to understand that not every sacrifice is visible, but everyone leaves a mark, and that, even when bleeding, it is still possible to walk with dignity. Thank you for being with me. We still have more steps to go, but now the ground is firm and the walk is mine. Some people think that humiliation ends when justice is done, as if the exposed truth washes the soul and erases what was left behind. But it's not like that. Humiliation has deep roots. It doesn't go out, it manages itself. Even after everything I've achieved, even with my name cleared and my story told, there are still days when the memory of contempt cuts through me like a knife. The contempt of a daughter who kicked me out like I was dust. The contempt of neighbors who laughed behind my back, of co-workers who whispered when they saw me enter the room. And worst of all, the contempt that I once felt for myself. The cruelest moment was not the hearing, nor the videos edited with my distorted voice. It was that morning when I needed to go to a pharmacy, and I noticed that a young attendant, upon recognizing me, switched cashiers so as not to serve me. He didn't say anything. He just got up, adjusted his coat, and walked away. The girl who remained answered me normally, but the other's gesture was recorded. It was proof that for many, my truth is still smaller than the invented version of myself. There was also that episode on the bus when an older woman commented loudly to her friend that this was the mother who was exposed by her daughter. She spoke out loud on purpose. I didn't respond. I went down 2 points earlier, not out of cowardice, but out of tiredness. And because I learned that sometimes silence is the only shield that doesn't hurt back. And yet, among so many small wounds, there was a moment that humbled me in a different way. A moment when I needed to ask for help. After moving to the new village, before getting the job at the community center, I was in need. There was a month when I was only able to pay the rent because I asked for an advance on a sewing order. And to eat, I had to accept a basic food basket from the local parish. I went there with shame, with shoulders hunched and face turned to the ground. The nun who welcomed me was kind, but when he asked for the full name for registration, I hesitated. I thought about lying, in inventing. But he told the truth. She wrote calmly and handed me the box. When I looked inside, I saw that there was not only food, but also hygiene items, toilet paper, sanitary pads, things that they normally don't put in. And along with it, a folded message. It was written like this: "It is not humiliation to accept what you need to continue. Humiliation is when the world denies you even that." That day, I cried with the box in my hands, and for the first time, I understood that not all humiliation is destructive. Some show us where we are still broken, and others where we are still human. Public exposure was also a form of humiliation. There was a news channel that used my name again, months later, when another similar case broke in the press. They used my face as a reference, as if I had opened a new category of scandal. I didn't file a lawsuit, I didn't respond, but I went to the newsroom. I asked to speak to the person in charge. I was attended to by a man in a suit who spoke hurriedly. He said it was editorial policy. I said my life was not a category, that my pain was not window dressing. He was silent, and that was enough. I left there with the certainty that my dignity no longer needed anyone's validation. The greatest humiliation of all, however, was the family one, because there is no greater pain than being diminished by those you created. Camilla treated me as if I had been an accident in her life, as if my presence were a stain. And the worst thing is that I left. For years, I accepted hay-crumbs of affection in exchange for silence. I endured harsh words to maintain a false peace. I was pushed to the back of the house, to the corners of the photos, to the footnotes of the stories. And I did all this thinking I was protecting the relationship. But protecting what destroys you is a silent way to die. When I decided to tell everything, when I opened up my past and gave every piece of it to the world, I knew retaliation would come, and it came. I lost friends. I lost trust from people who said they admired me, but I gained something else. I got the chance to look in the mirror and finally hold my own reflection, without lowering your eyes, without deviating, because dignity is not the opposite of humiliation. It is the decision to continue, even after being thrown to the ground. If you have ever felt this type of pain, if you have ever been exposed, humiliated, silenced, comment here with the word resistance, because that's what it's all about. Resist when they want you to disappear. Like this video, subscribe to the Emotion of Age channel and activate the bell. Share with someone who has gone through something similar. Someone who needs to remember that you can still get up after shame. That dignity is not lost with a mistake. It is lost when we give up fighting for it. And I chose not to give up. I'm still here. It's still me. Stronger, more whole, more true. Today, when I look in the mirror, I still see the marks. Not just on my face or hands, but in the way I move, the way I breathe, the way I look at the world. The marks of life do not disappear. They just change places within us. But what really changed was the way I exist. I no longer apologize for breathing. I no longer try to fit into the tight space that others think I deserve. I exist entirely, for the first time in a long time. My routine now is simple. I wake up early. I make coffee. I listen to the radio while watering the plants in the backyard. I have a rocking chair on the porch where I sometimes sit, just watching the sky change color. This silence is not the same as the one that accompanied me before. That was a silence that screamed. This is the silence that welcomes. I learned that peace is not living without conflict. It's living truthfully. The community center became more than just a job. It's a space where all versions of myself can coexist. The woman who was once afraid, the mother who failed, the grandmother who was rejected, the survivor who chose to speak out. There, I don't need to hide anything. And because I don't hide it, I am respected. The women who come to me are not looking for advice. They look for someone who won't judge them. And in that, I am an expert. The other day, a younger girl asked me how I held up, how I managed to survive after being so rejected, so exposed, so hurt. I took a deep breath and responded with something I only recently understood. I held on because somewhere inside me, even when everything fell apart, there was a piece that didn't accept dying. A small but insistent piece, a name that no one could erase. And it was that bit that pulled me back. That made me continue, even without knowing where. Today I also understand that forgiveness, the one we expect so much from others, begins within us. I still haven't been forgiven by Camilla. Maybe it never will be. But I forgave myself. I forgave myself for having been fragile, for having made mistakes trying to protect, for having loved with fear, for having remained silent for so long. I forgave myself for not being the perfect mother, because no mother is, but many like me gave everything they had, even if it was little. The greatest proof that my story was not in vain is in the small reconciliations that life has given me. Not soap opera reconciliations with hugs and tears, but discreet, silent gestures, like the note left by a neighbor on my door, thanking me for the advice I gave her weeks before, like the invitation to speak at a school about dignity in old age, like the message from one of the daughters of a woman I helped, saying that she now understood her mother better. These small victories sustain me. They show me that my pain became a bridge, that shame was not the end of my story, and that age is no barrier to starting over. On the contrary, it is proof that time teaches us what the years cannot explain. My youngest grandchildren already know who I am. They know that I was arrested for a past that didn't end in a cell, but in abandonment. They know I made a mistake, but they also know that I fought to protect, that I ran away, not out of cowardice, but out of necessity. And most importantly, they know I'm here, alive, gift, with arms open, but no longer lowered. With every step I take now, I stand firm, not out of arrogance, but out of gratitude. Gratitude for having survived, for getting my voice back, for turning rejection into sharing, for having accepted that some ties, when they break, make room for us to sew others, stronger and truer. If you're listening to this now, if you've made it this far in this story, and somehow, if he saw me, he commented with the word presence, because that's who we are when we choose to follow. Presence, existence. Go ahead. Like this video, subscribe to the Emotion of Age channel, and activate the bell. Share with someone who needs to remember that dignity does not come from what others think of us, but from what we finally understand about ourselves. There is still one last chapter, and in it, I'll tell you what it's like to live lightly, even with scars. Because in the end, that's what's left. And that's all we need. Stay with me. It's almost over, and maybe it's just the beginning. Today the day dawned with clear skies, eye aching blue. A light wind flutters the curtains in my house, and the smell of fresh coffee fills the rooms. Life now has a calmer pace, not because it became easy, but because I learned to breathe more calmly, even when memories are pressing. The house where I live has no luxury, but there is light. There is silence of peace, and no more oppression. It smells like clean clothes, warm bread, a freshly swept floor, and above all, it has space. Space for me, for who I am, who I was for, and who I can still be for. The days remain simple. Sometimes a new woman appears at the community center with her eyes full of pain. She doesn't need to say anything, just the way she holds her bag against her body, the way she sits slowly in the chair, trying not to attract attention. I look at her with deep respect, because I was once that woman. I've entered many places, thinking I wasn't worthy of being there. But now, when I see these women coming, I stand up and offer them a glass of water. I ask the name. I hear the pause between sentences. And when she finishes, I say what I wish I had heard when the world turned its back on me. You are not alone, and it's not too late. On weekends, I sometimes go to the market. I buy ripe fruit, green scents, homemade bread. People know me as Donna Teresa. Some know my story, others don't. But no one treats me like they used to. The neighborhood greets me naturally. Sometimes they invite me for a coffee, a chat at the gate. I go when I want. I refuse when necessary, not to be rude, but because I learned that I deserve the right to choose where I put my energy. I spent too many years trying to please those who despised me. Now, I only stay where there is respect. I received a letter from my eldest granddaughter. She is finishing high school. He wrote in firm, mature handwriting and said that he understood. Better now, the silence I carried. Who talked to her sister, who saw the old videos, who wanted to understand both sides. He said that he didn't excuse everything, but that he wanted to listen to me with an open heart. That moved me deeply. because there is no greater reward than being seen as human. And that's what I always wanted. Be seen truthfully, with flaws, with history, with courage. Today I have a box where I keep letters like this. They are few, but they are worth more than gold. They are words that were born from shock, pain, compassion. Words that clean wounds without haste. And when I feel fragile, I read one of them. I remember that my story may have started in the mud, but it ended with my feet firmly on the ground. And that's the ground I want to leave for other women. A solo listening, of empathy, of reconstruction. If I could go back in time, I wouldn't erase anything. Because even mistakes brought me here. And it was by facing the consequences that I discovered the strength that exists in not giving up on yourself. I am often asked if I have forgiven those who hurt me. I answer yes, but not with words, nor with hugs. I forgave with distance, with conscious choices, with well-defined limits. Because true forgiveness is not submitting. It's about freeing yourself. The deepest lesson I carry is this: there is no love that justifies humiliation. There is no past that defines the end of a woman. And there is no right age to say enough is enough. Courage has no birth date, and dignity has no expiration date. She may be asleep, but never dead. If you've been listening to my story so far, I want to thank you. Thank you for listening to every part of me, for not judging without knowing, for walking by my side even from afar. Maybe you recognized yourself at some point. Maybe it reminds you of someone. Maybe it just makes sense. And that's already a lot. Because when a woman courageously shares her pain, she isn't just telling a story. She is paving the way for others to rise up. I hope you take something from here with you. One word, a gesture, a new breath, and above all, the certainty that there is still time, which is still possible, that there is still beauty even after the fall, that there is dignity even after shame, and that there is value in simply continuing. Leave your comment with the word rebirth. This will be our last keyword, because that's what this story represents. A rebirth, so silent, suffering, true. Like this video, subscribe to the Emotion of Age channel and activate the bell. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that starting over is not a shame. It's shameful to accept living in the dark. And you weren't born to hide. You were born to be whole. Thank you for being here. May your life, like mine, find a new path. It doesn't matter how much time has passed. It's never too late to get your name back. It's never too late to regain your place. It's never too late to finally be who you are.